Podcast. This is episode number 32. And today on our panel we have Nick Niemeyer.
Good morning, everyone.
Rob Simpson.
Good morning.
Danny Blue is going to join us shortly. And myself, Eric Isaacson. And we have some awesome guests today from Microsoft. And I'll let them introduce themselves. It's three awesome minds together in one room. We haven't had this happen before. It's pretty awesome. So go ahead, Jacob.
All right. My name is Charles Morris. I'm a program manager lead on the Internet Explorer, now Project Spartan team. And we all work on working with the web developer community and making sure they know what we're doing.
I'm Adrian-Bateman. I'm also a program manager. In fact, we're all program managers, which just by explanation, program manager is the title we give to people that aren't developers or testers. So we kind of do everything else. I work on Charles's team, and most of my time is spent working on thinking about web standards and how we do web standards today and thinking about what we'll be doing tomorrow.
And I'm Jacob-rossi. I share the same team with these guys. I work on web standards in the developer community, and I run our platform roadmap at status.modern.ie.
Very cool. So thank you guys for coming on today. We have a lot of questions, as I'm sure you well know. I've been bothering Jacob on Twitter quite a lot lately. So
I don't mind.
why don't we just I'm glad you don't mind. I'm really glad and excited for what's happening with Internet Explorer / Spartan. I think there's this little confusion as far as will Spartan actually replace Internet Explorer? Because they are two separate browsers, is my understanding. Correct or no?
That's correct. Yeah. Our intention is definitely that Project Spartan will replace Internet Explorer. The reason that we're talking about both still is that we think we need kind of a handover period. So because Spartan isn't going to support everything, especially some legacy things like ActiveX and BHO, some of these extension mechanisms that have been around for 20 years, we want to make sure we have a transition period so that people, which we think is really going to be the minority and mostly enterprise-type customers that need things like toolbars and things like that, will have some time to actually transition, move off some of those technologies. But certainly our vision is, out of the gate, most people are just using Spartan, and that's all they see. And then down the road, someday, we complete the transition.
Now on the blog too, I see you guys writing a lot about Chakra and Edge HTML and Trident. Can we kind of clarify the differences between these technologies?
Yeah, why don't I go with that? So Trident is this kind of amorphous name for most of the engine that's been part of IE for years and years and years. If you ask people on the team what exactly Trident is and where the boundaries of Trident are, then nobody really knows, kind of lost in the mists of time. I'm guessing we have a couple of engineers that have been around since the IE2, IE3 time, and they probably would give you a very precise definition. But for most people, Trident is the engine behind IE, and kind of like Blink is for Chrome and Gecko is for Firefox. That's what Trident is. And then in IE9, we rewrote the JavaScript engine, and so Chakra is the name of our JavaScript engine, which started in IE9, and we've obviously continued to develop. The most recent blog posts are all about the ECMAScript 6 support that we're adding, and so we're really proud of the work that the guys over in the Chakra team are doing on ES6 support. And then Edge is the new engine, and so in order to work on for Windows 10 and with the Project Spartan release, we took an approach similar a little bit to what Google did when they forked Blink from WebKit. And so Edge is our fork of Trident. We started with the Trident code base, and we duplicated the core of the engine into a new DLL. And then we started deleting code. And we started deleting all of the legacy code, the things that were old proprietary extensions that we were supporting for legacy reasons in old versions of IE.
Wow, that must feel really good.
It's like taking a shower.
Everybody's like celebrating, lines of code deleted. And a lot of the things that we're removing are things that have been replaced by newer web standards that we also have support for now. And so that gives us a much cleaner base to go forward from. We're adding new capabilities as well, obviously, and spending a lot of time closing some of the interrupt gaps, the kind of things that trip up developers. And it's obviously a lot easier when you've got a cleaner code base. So that's Edge.
Very cool. So there's a technical preview out there for Windows 10, and I know you can get the remote access. And if you have an account with Microsoft, you can get that. I'm on a Mac. Don't smack me through the Hangout, but I've been trying to figure out how to actually create an environment where I can test Spartan and test IE11 in Windows 10. And there's not a lot of documentation on that from what I saw. Is there a place where I could go or other developers can go who are on Macs or Linux to figure this out?
Yeah, so we launched last fall, I guess it was, the remote IE service. It started as a journey from the modern.ie website that we launched years ago, which was focused exactly at this problem, helping developers test no matter what platform they're on. And so that started with a bunch of virtual machine images for a variety of different tools that you can download. But we know that's a pain. You've got to download 4 to 10 gigabytes of virtual machine image. You have to refresh them occasionally to get the latest versions. And oh yeah, they're going to use a bunch of your resources on your machine. So we partnered up with a team over in Azure and built the remote IE service. So this is remote.modern.ie is where you can go to get this. It's a quick sign up. It's free. And you can essentially stream the latest version, currently Internet Explorer, to a variety of different platforms, including even your iOS device, should you like to try that. It's just targeted developers, so it looks like the Windows desktop IE that you're familiar with, but it is running the latest Edge HTML engine that Abe was talking about. So this is going to get you access, even on a Mac, to the 3,000 some odd interoperability fixes and new standards that we're working on from other platforms.
And just to add one more thing, our goal is to move that to Spartan when it is available. Yeah. It's just Spartan's not out for preview yet. We're still working behind the scenes. We've announced it, but when it's out as part of the Windows Insider program in preview, then we'll also update Remote IE. We may have to also rename it at some point, but it'll be available through the same streaming solution to Macs, Android, or iOS.
As well as Windows.
As well as Windows, yeah. Some people use it to stream to Windows 7, for example, or Windows Phone.
Now, when you say Windows, Windows 10, are you referring to just on the desktop, laptop, X-top, whatever you want to call it, or is that Windows across all your devices?
Do you mean specific to the remote solution?
No, not specific to the remote, but is Internet Explorer or Spartan is Spartan when it comes out, where it's fully out there and release candidate or beta, or however it's first released, will that be available on Windows Phone, Surface devices, Xbox, stuff like that?
Yeah, good question. So, yeah, our intention is absolutely for Spartan to be the browser across all of Microsoft's devices. So initially with Windows 10, that's going to be on Windows PC, which we can think of as everything from a Surface-type tablet to a laptop, a desktop PC, one of those crazy Surface Pixel TVs, as well as Windows Phone, which you can think of as basically 7-inch and below. We are also working to bring it to Xbox, but that's going to be in a future update. That'll be kind of later on in a few more months.
And the technical previews might roll out at different times. So you saw that we updated the desktop technical preview for Windows 10 in January, and then we launched the first technical preview for phones a couple of weeks after that. For some of the Windows devices, we're hoping to be able to roll that out to more devices over time. And so it's not, we don't have a precise cadence. So it may be that the desktop preview comes out and then the phone gets updated, or it might be that they happen at the same time. And as we move forward, we'll continue to roll out updated previews as they're ready. We kind of have this pipeline of previews through Microsoft where the people that are kind of okay with the risk of installing last night's build do that, and then as we check things out and the build quality is proven, we roll it out across the operating systems group at Microsoft and across kind of the broad people at Microsoft. And if that kind of still works and we still see good quality and it working well across everybody's devices here, that's when it then goes out to the Windows Insider program, and you can be on one of two different speeds. So do you want to get it straight away, or do you want to get it after a few more people have tested it? And so that's kind of the progression we go through. And so we're really, weeks away from a developer checking in code to actually landing in the Insider program, which is a really new feeling for us. Like it's very different from the past where, we have planned milestones maybe months in advance, and so you knew that you wouldn't get feedback on something for a really long time. Now we're getting feedback really quickly, and there's lots of new ways of providing feedback to us. We have a lot of telemetry, and then also people just sending us suggestions. And so that's kind of one of the big ways that we're changing how we're developing for Project Spartan.
And you asked about like sharing across devices. One of the things that really has been a long journey for us, we've kind of moved it in pieces over the years, has been what we're now enjoying, which is we're able to produce a build of Spartan and the Edge HTML engine that produces builds for both phone and PCs at the same time. So we have this completely converged code base, which means there's, from an engineering standpoint, zero lag between the two. So choices to release are just based on, quality and that kind of thing. But behind the scenes, we're daily producing both at the same time. There's not two development projects happening.
Yeah. And
so do you think I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna add that a lot of this, especially in the latest release with the actual user experience for the browser being, as Jacob said, built out of the same code, is enabled by what we call the Universal App Platform in Windows 10, which is basically a way for all app developers to write a single app that targets phone, all sorts of different phone, desktop, and above. So we're building on the same platform that we're giving to third-party app developers.
Yeah, it goes to also say that includes the WebView control that is available to native apps on phone and on desktop, and so that guy is running, Edge HTML, and we'll keep it up to date and evergreen, just like we're going to do with Spartan.
That's awesome. There's a lot of platforms where the WebView gets neglected.
Yep.
Well, with the release of React Native and some of the other JavaScript engine running I guess mobile creation tools, do you think that the Windows applications will start to utilize more of the direct-to-native APIs to get the experience, or do you think that you would rely on the web views for a lot of these apps that distribute to many different platforms?
That's a good question. We're building a couple different approaches to this. The web view, is obviously a key core part of a lot of folks' apps, but we have a couple other things that we're not quite ready to talk about yet. But once we round out that plan, I think we'll share more. But at the center of our plan is making sure that if you're using the web as your cross-platform vehicle, you should be able to just make it work on Windows, fairly effortlessly. And so we're working with Cordova and these folks as well to make sure that those approaches are working just fine on our platform. We've been making changes. One of the standards we've implemented recently was content security policy, and so we're making changes around how we can use that for better interoperability with security policies in apps and that type of thing. So I think we're pretty close to finalizing the details on that for app developers. There's not yet like a Visual Studio for building Windows 10 apps, and so I think that's also sort of a prerequisite to really tell the story here. But that is in the works. So
I think we could also throw ASM into that bucket as another kind of native-ish technology where most of the ASM that gets created is going to be coming out of some other tool or some other language. But yeah, I mean, as Jacob said, our main focus is to give developers choice, and in general, like of course we have to prioritize at some level, but in general, our goal is to say, we want to enable developers in the way that they're building apps today, whether that's web views or something that's more native.
That's great. I remember when I first started in web development, and I know some younger developers might not know, but Internet Explorer 5.5 and 6 was like the browser when I was starting, and we were all sort of learning this hacked up language, JavaScript and HTML, and you guys were the innovators at that point. You had Ajax created basically because you had your ActiveX object, and then Firefox and other groups decided, let's make this a standard, and make it more broad. So you guys were pioneers in that way, and the browser was the best at the time. And Firefox sort of came in and said, well, we're going to make this open and community driven, and they really pushed the limits, and a lot of the Internet Explorer features fell behind because of proprietary like CSS and JavaScript and JScript in that case, and you had to use filters in the CSS, and still, even with IE9, this does, and it's a lot less, this does cause some issues, but we make fun of Internet Explorer as developers and say that it's this horrible experience, but it's a large majority of our users. So it's exciting when I hear things like that you guys are actually taking the reins and moving forward, because the technical preview you have, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have a release of Windows 10 coming out. When that comes out, anyone who has a legal copy of 7.1 of Windows and up gets a free upgrade for the first year that it's out. Right there, that enables us. Yeah, that's crazy. That enables us to get massive amounts of updates on the browsers. So a lot of the lower versions go down. Hopefully everything moves to Spartan, but probably not right away. So that's exciting.
Well, so frankly, I have a guilty pleasure of enjoying a lot of old IE memes that I have my particular favorites. Maybe I'll share them on Twitter later. But I think it's really healthy to look back and study the past and think about how that influences the next thing that we build. You talked about some of the proprietary features, and you alluded to the fact that we really walked away from the browser. You know, there were about 5 years or so where there wasn't in between releases, and there literally for a period of time wasn't an IE team.
We thought apps were the future, which was crazy.
And so, you know, you can see, you know, like the Firefox coming to the table and challenging the platform and really being successful with that helps reinforce for me that the web needs, you know, multiple browsers. This sort of co-opetition model drives the web forward in a very healthy way. And a key part of that is interoperability, right? Like that, you know, the reason the web continues to thrive is its reach, its openness, and the fact that, you know, it's that development nirvana of write code and it works everywhere. So that's our strategy for Spartan, right? It's focus on interoperability. You know, we look at the past. The other thing that we know and hear from web developers is, gosh, this new version of IE is nice, but, you know, none of my users have it. And so that's, you know, where we start building out the strategy, like, let's make Windows 10 free so that we can help web developers and get everybody to the latest version. They can stop, you know, trying to figure out what to do when Flexbox isn't there. Let's just get everybody out with Flexbox, you know.
And I think there's, like, it's even bigger than that. I think, you know, the fact that Windows 10 is going to be free, and so everybody, at least everybody that's in control of their own PC, so everybody at home who's got Windows 7 or Windows 8 will be able to just go to Windows 10. But we know that, you know, the reason why IE is a problem for web developers is those older versions. And it's those older versions that are deployed mostly in enterprises. So companies standardize on a browser, and unfortunately they standardized on old versions of IE because they probably have a bunch of web applications that were written years and years ago, and they only work in IE8 because they use some of the crazy IE8 things, or probably IE7 things even. You know, we have a bunch of applications like that even at Microsoft. You know, the time reporting application for you to book vacation runs in a really old version of IE, and so, like, we're as guilty as anybody else of having these really old applications. And so what we're trying to do is also invest in the enterprise mode feature that we've been building and gradually improving in IE11 since we shipped IE11. And we're investing more and more in that. And so, as well as making the platform free to people to upgrade who are consumers, we also want to make it easy for enterprises to move. So we're making this big bet that if we can get everybody onto the latest version of the Edge engine, but with support for legacy applications through enterprise mode, imagine what it'd be like to be a web developer building on the open web and not having to care about IE8 or IE9 or IE10. Like, I think that would be awesome.
Well, what I complain about on Twitter.
Do that.
Yeah. One other thing I'll add on to what Aid said is we're also changing our support policies, and so one of the reasons why a lot of enterprises have IE8 around is because Microsoft said, hey, we'll support you. You know, you've got 10 years of support for IE8, and that's a lot of the reason why enterprises, you know, come to Microsoft is to be supported. However, we saw that this wasn't creating a good situation. So last August, we announced some changes to our support policy, such that in January of 2016, only the latest version of IE for a given supported operating system will be supported. So as an example, if an enterprise is still on Windows 7, then the only version of IE that will be supported is IE11. So again, that starts to create that movement towards more recent, ideally our latest browser. So we had to give them a lot of lead time because enterprises, you know, need time to plan and all that. But you know, it's coming, and I think that's yet another factor that will help to kind of push people towards more modern browsers.
That's awesome. So how does enterprise mode work? How does it compare to XUA compat for older browsers?
And can we define what that is for those who don't know?
Yeah, so in a way, enterprise mode is an evolution of the XUA compatible meta tag that, you know, developers are probably familiar with. So our old strategy for Internet Explorer compatibility used to be each release came with a new document mode. So you'd have your latest document mode that was the default in later versions of IE, and you could opt into an emulation of a former version of Internet Explorer, and that worked fairly well. But what we found was, particularly in enterprise environments, there was an additional level of faithfulness to those previous versions. Perhaps things like restrictions on plugins that were introduced in later versions, or different, default settings and those types of things that would affect primarily enterprise compatibility. So with Spartan, what we've done, since we took the opportunity to fork the engine, we said this is perfect. Let's keep the old engine, the Trident MS-HTML engine, around for the sole reason of these enterprise compatibility scenarios. You've got a payroll thing you need to keep around. And let's build a mode for those enterprises that lets you load up that other engine selectively only when needed. So the way this works is, if you're an IT pro, the first step is we actually give you a tool that lets you index your enterprise
Well, I think they dropped off. So Rachel just came on a little while ago.
Yeah, and I was going to say that the number one thing I remember about working with Internet Explorer 6 back in the day was that you could embed fonts, and that was before embedding fonts was cool. So that's always I always like to remember back to those days when I was trying to embed fonts before anyone else was. What format did we use back then? Was it WAF?
Internet Explorer used EOT.
Ah.
Yeah.
It's been so long. I had terrible taste in fonts back then, too.
Well, that's why you needed custom ones. You can't have bad taste with the stock options. No.
Sometimes I think the system developers were better typographers than I am. Or was.
My idea of the height of design is green text on a black background. As long as it's monospace, I don't care what font it is, and we're good to go.
That was the design of my first site.
Are we back?
We're back.
Back.
Yay!
We missed you.
So,
We were
earlier,
Enterprise, and then you disappeared.
I was talking about the people who run last night's build of Windows 10. Well, sometimes things don't quite work out.
So let's see, where were we? So enterprise mode. So you're an IT professional. We give you a tool. This lets you survey your business for all the line of business applications that you're running. Turns out that's actually a really big challenge. If you're a company like Microsoft actually itself is putting this in practice, we have tens of thousands of internal websites, right? And enumerating those is incredibly hard, and most of those were designed for old versions of IE. So the first step is we give you this tool. This lets you sort of collect internal telemetry at your business for the sake of getting up and running with enterprise mode. So your next step is, as the sort of IT administrator, is you set up a list of the sites that need old versions of Internet Explorer, and you can pick the version. Usually it defaults to IE 8, which is sort of the most common, but you can pick other versions. And the way Spartan or the way the browser works is that if you navigate to one of these sites that are on your employer's list of legacy sites, we will hot swap out away from Edge HTML and load up the old Trident engine just for that site. And to the user, it's seamless. You don't, it looks the same. You're not switching browsers or anything like that. You just have the line of business site running in the older engine. And enterprise mode does two things. One is it loads up those document modes that XUA compatible would use. But two, it also makes some of those other adjustments that are a little bit more faithful emulations of IE8, perhaps relaxing certain policies or accepting more plugins, or changing certain default settings. There's a list of things. It's all on MSDN, but these we've found through a test piloting program with some of the top businesses in the world that it has a really high level of compatibility. We recently had like our top 25 enterprise customers here on campus, and we said, bring a laptop that's like IT provisioned, it's the image that you get from your employer, install IE11, and sit down with us and with an engineer from the platform team, and let's work through your application's needs and make sure that we can give you a high level of fidelity in terms of compatibility with what your application was designed for. And what this does is this allows enterprises to feel comfortable about moving to the latest version of the browser, because we're going to just keep this old engine as it is so that it's compatible. We'll make security updates as needed, but other than that, like, it's going to work the same way IE11 did. And you can run those selectively just for your enterprise stuff, but for everything else, it's Edge HTML. So if you're a web developer, you're not burdened by the fact that a business might choose to run an old version of IE, because they can run the latest version of the browser, and it will use the latest evergreen engine for the web, and only use this outdated legacy technology when necessary for some internal line of business thing.
So I just wanted to mention quickly a couple of things that make enterprise mode necessary, because we all know web developers do crazy things, and so one of the things that we've seen, and nobody can explain it, but there's a bunch of people who have enterprise applications, and in their XUA compatible meta tag they say IE equals 10, so they want 10 mode. But they do that for IE8, and in IE8 when you say IE equals 10, you get 8 mode, because there's no 10 mode, because it's IE8. And so then when people upgrade from IE8 to a later version, they get the mode that they were asking for, and the app breaks. So one of the things that enterprise mode does is it says, if we're emulating IE8, then the highest mode you can get is 8. Even if you ask for 10, you'll get 8, and then the app keeps working. Nobody knows why people were saying 10, but we've seen this on a large number, actually, of enterprises asking for the wrong mode, and things break. The other thing is around security. And so when you're in enterprise mode, we actually relax some of the security provisions. Like, our bet is it's better for you to be running the latest version of our browser with all of the security things in place and just relax it for those few sites that you need to, than to be running with a really old browser where it's relaxed all the time. And also, we didn't want to make that part of XUA compatible in the past, because then attackers would just say, oh, can you opt me into low security mode so that I can attack you? So we don't want to enable that, but if an enterprise chooses to put a site into a lower security mode in order to run some old ActiveX control, like, they're in control of that, and they know that they should get a plan to move away from that. So those are two examples of why XUA compatible wasn't sufficient and why enterprise mode is better.
I think you even said in your documentation for XUA that do not use this in production.
Yeah, basically,
So,
No one listened.
Yeah, nobody. I had to put some in for some of the apps that I've built.
So we're just going to rip that out for the public web. So we deprecated it in IE11. We said, hey, this is going to go away in a future release, so now's the time. Like, so if you're using XUA compatible on a public website, it's going to be a no-op for Windows 10 and Spartan.
Does that add a lot of overhead with the enterprise mode, like as far as
No, it's an on-demand feature. So we're if you only browse public websites, if you're at home and just using Spartan to get in a tweet storm or whatever, like, the old engine never loads up. So your your memory usage is low. and it's only loaded up on demand. So.
It sounds kind of like a reverse Chrome frame.
It's actually kind of like that, and like we switched to a different process to run that old engine. As Jacob said, it's seamless from a UI perspective, but it is kind of like that, yeah.
Yeah, if you thought that having each tab in a separate process was really cool technology, switching processes within the same tab is even more complex.
So what about, I know that Cortana is built in with this, right? And there's, what is the accessibility support and usage of Cortana on here?
So I'll talk, I guess, a little bit about how Cortana is going to show up in Spartan. So there's two aspects actually to Cortana. So there's the overall Cortana is integrated into Windows 10, and that's where you'll see a lot of the voice integration. So she's right there in the taskbar. I think at the January Windows 10 announced, Joe Belfiore demoed being able to say, "Hey Cortana," and having her kind of wake up and start listening. And then we're also doing some work to bake Cortana into the Spartan experience. So there's a couple of things that we've showed off so far. The first thing is what we call Ask Cortana, which is basically the scenario is if you're reading through a web page and you see something that you're not sure about. So normally you'd select it, copy it, paste it, open a new tab, and do a search. So instead of doing all that, you can just highlight it and say Ask Cortana, and you'll see a pane slide in from the right, and Cortana will basically give you contextual information about whatever you've highlighted. So a couple of examples. So this is all built off Bing in the back end, so it has a lot of kind of semantic knowledge about the web. So for example, if you highlight a location, we'll give you things like a map of that location, we'll give you directions, etc. If you highlight a food, we'll give you things like nutritional information. So it's all very contextual and, again, built off all the knowledge that we already have from Bing, but really kind of streamlines your experience because you don't have to, context switch out to a new tab. The other scenario that we've showed off is kind of similar, but it's more proactive. So the example we give is if you're browsing a restaurant site, she'll pop up in the address bar and say, I've got some information for you. And so you can choose to do nothing if you want, but if you notice that and you click on it, again, that pane will slide in from the right and give you a bunch of contextual information. So for example, for restaurants, we know the menu for the restaurant, we know the hours, we have a link to make a reservation on OpenTable or something like that. So again, instead of having to hunt around the website and see like where's the directions to this website or where's the menu, you just one click and all of that information is available at your fingertips. And so you can imagine that starting to explode out to, if we know about restaurants, then we probably know about a lot of other things that that you're browsing and can bring more information to you. So those are the main ways, at least for now, we are integrating Cortana. Actually, there's a third one, which is right within the address bar. So if you do things like, say, Seattle weather in the address bar, you'll actually see a really brief, we have our version of the drop-down suggestion list that comes down from the address bar, and we'll show a real quick summary of the forecast for Seattle or wherever you are within the address bar. We do the same thing for flights and a bunch of other kind of known queries. So those are the ways that we're integrating Cortana into Spartan itself. And like I said, there's Cortana within Windows 10, which is a whole other set of features.
Now, is this opt-in or opt-out for those features for Cortana?
So Cortana's opt-in when you first install the upgrade to Windows 10, or you get a new PC with Windows 10. The default experience is there's just a search box, and then you can click into that and go through the sign-in process for Cortana, and then enable it from there. And the great thing is that it actually stores Cortana's notebook is stored in the cloud, so it roams across your devices if you use the same login. And so like I can look up flight information on my phone, and then that will be the same information that Charles just mentioned. If you put in information about a flight in the address bar, it's all tied together. So you sign up for it on your PC, and then it connects to the cloud notebook.
Right, and once you've opted in Windows, then you'll be opted in for Spartan as well.
And it's easy enough to turn it off if you wanted to, though.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And as far as accessibility goes, I think Internet Explorer even has a good history of this. You know, a lot of the JAWS users for screen reading, they've, you know, you guys seem to have really good support for that. Do you have a good support for the ARIA attributes for HTML and, you know, other, you know, maybe gestures and touch, as far as like standardizing on that with the other browsers?
Yeah, so we have a team downstairs that's focused specifically on rounding out the accessibility story. We know that there are a few gaps that we have to fill, and so we have a team working on that. And then also thinking about new ideas as well. And so last November, so every year the W3C brings together all the people that work on different web standards to have like this big meeting, and all the different working groups get together. And so at that meeting in November, our accessibility team proposed a new accessibility API. This is really early, and we're just experimenting with it right now. But one of the things that we've found is that if you're building really complex applications, things like the Office applications or Google apps that are running in the browser, and you want to make them really accessible, it's hard to do that with the static accessibility markup. Things like ARIA, where you're having to decorate the DOM with all these things, and especially if somebody's not using a screen reader, for example, then spending a lot of time going and changing the ARIA markup might make your app slower than it needs to be. And also, if you are aware of kind of the focus of the screen reader, maybe you can actually put more information and give a better experience to somebody that's using a screen reader or some other accessibility tool. And so we've been starting to propose and talk about more of a dynamic API that allows you to get more information about what is the accessibility tool doing right now, and how can I have much more of a dynamic interaction with the accessibility tree, rather than doing all this work that either might not be used or doing less work but scattered throughout the whole document because you actually don't know how somebody's engaging. So there's kind of two parts to this. We're going to add more features that we know we need to do where we don't have enough depth, and then we're going to look at new things and how we can make the rich applications that everybody really wants to go build and make them a lot more accessible in the future.
Very cool. Rob, do you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to step in and ask. So, in regards for developers, it looks like from benchmarks that the JavaScript engine has really stepped up. I was just wondering, what parts of the engine would you really say have made the biggest difference with Spartan?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, the Chakra team is really doing an awesome job. I mean, they like not just performance, but also, you know, with their support for ES6, is, you know, we're at least neck and neck as in terms of.
I think you guys are ahead, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I you know, kind of leapfrog each other, which is fun. That's actually really exciting. But yeah, they're doing a bunch of awesome work. Asm's going to really, you know, kick butt with performance in certain situations. As far as the rest of the platform, there's actually quite a lot of performance to be had from just simply, you know, ripping out all this old code, right? Like, you get rid of, you know, some of the old cruft around, you know, old fun things like attach event or VML or these things, right? Like, yeah, do I serve? I won't say the whole scary list, but we'll be here forever. But we actually started seeing performance wins just from that work alone. Another big piece that we're working on right now is DOM performance. We've sort of over the years, we have the Trident code base dates back 20 years, right? And so it's expected that we kind of have to turn over that code in each in different areas over each release. I think it started a lot back in IE9 with hardware acceleration, IE10 with a lot of our touch work. IE11 was when we did a lot of the enterprise mode work, and F12 work, and so one of the last sort of subsystems to really get overhauled is our DOM, and that's becoming increasingly important. And as the web moves towards MVC frameworks and that type of thing, it's becoming the next biggest bottleneck. And it's not just about re-architecting and optimizing the hell out of it. It's also about talking with other browsers about how we modernize this API surface that's frankly fairly antiquated itself and not prone to not well suited for some of the single page application designs we're building today. And so we've been participating. We just got some engineers back from Sydney where there's the CSS working groups or the task force, I guess, that's called Houdini, which is about exposing more customizability through CSS and a number of different related features that hopefully are going to take some of the burden off of what has historically been known as a slow DOM across the board in all browsers, but particularly ours, we're gonna optimize out.
So I'm curious, what do you make of? I imagine you saw Flipboard's write-up of how they're using Canvas and a duplicate DOM sort of to maintain accessibility and have their performance, sort of like it seems like going around your arm to get to your elbow for both performance and accessibility. I'm curious to know what your team's take is on that, because obviously with an animated web, performance is more important than ever, but if that means going to the GPU through Canvas, there are conflicts with accessibility.
Yeah, no, it's been a really interesting topic. I would say, if anything else, the Flipboard thing really serves to light a fire under projects like Houdini that are aiming to solve this problem in a way that you're not just basically rebuilding a rendering engine, right? You're not throwing away your accessibility. You're not having to manage this impressive rendering tree and all of the draw operations necessary with that. And I think that's the end goal. But what's cool is, well, first of all, it's an impressive CS project. I mean, just from any perspective, it's a complicated thing that they did, and it's really impressive that they pulled it off from a technology standpoint. But it's there's only certain shops in the world, I think, that could even build such a thing, right? And so we need to be able to build this in a way that it's accessible to the whole suite of web developers, right? Like that the platform just is able to achieve 60 FPS and can give you these custom, bespoke animation experiences that are tied with scrolling and stick to your finger and all this stuff. And I think that by sticking to sticking to the DOM and in terms of the Houdini work and re-architecting that, we're going to be able to provide APIs that are above and beyond the performance of what you can achieve with Canvas. So we spent, for example, in IE10, 3 years re-architecting our input pipeline for touch, so that you could get under 50 milliseconds delay even on the lowest end phones when you pan a page. Well, we want you to be able to have that exact same performance even if that panning kicks off some cool little opacity animation, right? You shouldn't have to throw all of that out just simply because you had a slightly different view in mind or more tailored experience in mind. You shouldn't have to throw that all away and rebuild it yourself. And so I think as we evolve the platform to take into account some of these new app-like experiences and whatnot that we're trying to build on the web, I think we're going to end up in a better place. But we've reached out to Flipboard. We've been having good conversations with them. We've been pointing them towards things like Houdini and whatnot to get their feedback at an early stage, because they're going to have some of the best insights into the needs of the platform.
I think that's the most important thing. Like the Flipboard thing was a point in time. They had a problem they wanted to solve. I don't think we should be too critical of them for doing that. The most important thing is that we learn and understand the challenges that they were facing. Looking forward to them sharing some of those issues, and then working together across browsers for us to really figure out how to solve that, and solve that in an interoperable way so that then everybody can benefit. And then obviously the next step is getting this into libraries and frameworks so that it becomes really easy for people to build those kind of immersive experiences that feel great but are easier to write and don't involve this kind of huge engineering effort.
And are accessible to everyone.
Right. Yeah. Getting anytime that we have the opportunity to get web developers more involved in the early days of standardization, it's a good thing. A lot of folks across the browser vendors, the engineers on those browser teams, had a past life or maybe a moonlight still in web development, but it's almost like speaking engagements where you get a little bit of imposter syndrome, right? Like we need folks like Flipboard and the Netflixes of the world, whatnot, participating in these standards. This is a strategy that we've tried to use before. I think about as we moved away from antiquated plug-in technologies, one of the things, a similar story was that Netflix, right? We needed them as the leading experts on internet video streaming and dealing with things like premium content and whatnot. And so they came to the table and they helped us design the APIs. They helped us test it at scale in working with the Chrome team and others on developing some of these media features. And ultimately, we ended up with a better, web standard for everyone. And so, Flipboard doing this work and sort of, lighting the fire under everybody, and then coming to the table to help shape the future to solve this problem is a really good thing for the web.
I thought it was pretty cool that they even bothered to write about it.
Yes.
I know
Yes.
a lot of interactive shops have been doing very similar things without regard to the accessibility of their projects, but very few of them sit down and write up what they've done and why. So I thought it was an actually rather odd and noble gesture.
Yeah, especially since they knew they were probably going to catch some criticism for it.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think the criticism, while it's a discussion that needed to happen, I can imagine it wasn't pleasant to feel that backlash from the end of the developers and the designers.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, one more question. Are the Web Animations API on the radar at all?
So everything in our plan is on status.modern.ie. Web Animations is not currently in development right now. We have several folks that are engaged in that standardization work. We talked a little bit about it with some of the Chrome team that was up here this last week. And I don't have like an exact timetable for you, but it is definitely something that we are looking at. We see, it's the obvious next iteration step past CSS animations and transitions, and I think it's gonna be really powerful. We just haven't, we haven't assigned developers yet to go implement it, but I do see a future with that eventually. But if you stick to status, like, you'll get the news as soon as we decide.
And get people to vote for it on user voice too.
Yes, yeah. So I think that's
I ask them every other week.
Yeah. User voice.
I actually go on every other week too. That's awesome.
It's what web developers want, and we, the voting mechanism is just one way that we get feedback, but what web developers want is a critical component to how we decide what we build next. It's not the only component, but it is a major component there.
There was one question that I had regarding the top 5 in the user voice, since you brought it up. You just announced that you're having support for ASM, and you have the number one was, I think, like get rid of IE or something, right? Or make it updatable. Something that I was like, oh, they'll never do that, and you're making it updatable. So it's like now we're having new versions. And there was another one that you guys did as well on there, using a different engine. So now you have Edge, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's 2 of them that are very dear to my heart. They're in the top 5, number 2 and number 4, and that's the Shadow DOM, unprefixed, and custom elements. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Jacob talked about the DOM modernization that we're working on and kind of reworking that subsystem. First of all, that's a prerequisite for us doing work in this area. We need to get just the core DOM working really well. We want to improve the performance, improve the memory management, and just really tune up that system. And so as we're doing that with the notion of Shadow DOM and that kind of mechanism in mind. But we're not writing the code at the same time. We're just working on getting things working as they are. I think the Shadow DOM conversation is still pretty dynamic. If you look at the discussions happening at W3C around Shadow DOM and actually the broad set of web components, APIs, including custom elements, I think there's still a lot of discussion about exactly how we should make this work. There's some pretty active discussion right now looking at is it possible for us to simplify Shadow DOM, like the implementation that's in Blink today, rounds out the spec as it is now, but there were a bunch of compromises made to kind of get that spec to land, and so some parts of it are pretty complicated to understand and actually pretty hard to implement as a consequence. And so there's this active discussion about can we make it simpler. There's actually going to be a meeting, I think it's in Mountain View, in the next month or so, where we're all going to get together again at Google's office and talk more about this. And so we'll be participating in that. I think we'll get there. The question is, will the Shadow DOM that everybody ends up implementing and be interoperable be the same as the spec as it is today? It seems less likely that that's going to be the case, and so we really want to make sure that we get this solved in a way that everybody can implement and everybody can rely on. And maybe we spend a bit more time thinking through this with polyfills and getting a bit more experience before everybody lands on the same place.
I think there's another opportunity here as we sort of take a step back here and look at how we might can simplify things and increase the interoperability. Apple had some good suggestions on changes as well. One of the things is, as we talk to various web frameworks and whatnot, is that in my mind, web frameworks, especially UI frameworks that are out there, ought to be the first consumers of this API, right? They stand to gain a lot from a good componentization model. And I don't think that we involved them as much as we could have in this particular standards work. And there's some concerns or some problems that they face as framework developers that we could solve with some changes to how web components work. One example that we hear a lot from popular UI widget frameworks is that Shadow DOM sort of provides this loose style encapsulation, right? It has a boundary, but any web developer can pierce it. And from a framework developer's perspective, that doesn't lift what is a fairly heavy burden, which is style compatibility. As you upgrade and rev your framework, you might want to change things like the orders of nodes in the DOM or class names or whatnot. And if the host of your control is able to completely and utterly style whatever, you're often tied to that burden of compatibility. And so we've discussed before, but didn't really finalize into the standard, ways that controls and frameworks could actually provide a tighter boundary and just surface up the individual style bits of their control through something like CSS custom properties and values as a way to solve some of their problems and make this easier for them to use. And so we've had conversations with most of the top frameworks out there about this, and we're taking that feedback back into the standardization process to help move it even forward further from where it is, so that it provides better good across the board.
Yeah, and a bunch of those people are going to be at this next meeting as well. And so I think making sure that the framework authors actually get to come and say their piece is an important part of us taking a close look at this.
So you're going to have obviously Google, but I mean, are there going to be representatives from Firefox, WebKit, and all that?
Yeah, it's a meeting of the people participating in the standards process for this. So,
right.
So Google will be there, Mozilla, Apple. I'm not sure if there'll be Opera engineers there. Definitely people from frameworks and people passionate about accessibility. So like this is it's a working group meeting. It's available to anybody that's participating in the standards process. You can find information about it on the public web apps mailing list. And so yeah, we're really hoping that everybody will be there and we'll actually make some good progress.
Well, I'm really excited. I'm really psyched for what you've been doing. I know we're a little over time, so we'll wrap it up. I did want to talk about developer tools and I heard Ray Bango, is it, or Bango? Bango. Ray Bango on Jen Simmons' show, The Web Ahead, and he was talking about how Chrome extensions get you can use them inside of Spartan. Right? Is that correct or not?
We're planning an extension model for Spartan for a future update to Spartan. The exact details of the extension platform for that are still being fleshed out, but it's not going to be COM-based browser helper objects from Internet Explorer. So we're still kind of early days in that project. It turns out building a brand new browser is quite a lot of work. So that will probably come in an update after Spartan, and we'll talk a lot more once some of that's fleshed out. But I think that it will play an important role in developer tooling. I think it's going to open up a lot of fun opportunities for going above and beyond what we're building and innovating on in browser developer tools.
And you're of course going to add right-click on your F12 tip tools, right?
Yeah, actually, we
inspect element.
Inspect element in IE11, and that's going to stay in Spartan. In fact, I just saw that show up the other day in a build, so I was really excited. So
it's the little things.
That's right. Like milestones along the way. I think the first one was, it has a back button. So we're now that we have inspect element, we're a lot farther along.
Well, thank you guys. Rob, Rachel, Nick, do you have anything else you want to add?
I'm awesome. You guys have been great. Thank you.
Definitely have been.
Rachel,
you are awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Well, thank you guys. If people want to get involved, with helping out, I know that you guys aren't open source, but I know you have status up there, and you have Open Tech, Microsoft Open Tech for open source. If people want to help contribute to that. But as far as like helping out, push the envelope with Spartan, and contacting you and asking more questions about this, What's the best way to do it, and what are your Twitter handles and all that?
So, so the best place right now is at IE Dev Chat on Twitter. We're usually on there about once a month or so to do a hashtag Ask IE chat. So those are straight engineers, no marketing or anything like that. You can ask technical questions, and we'll try and do our best to answer it in 140 characters.
Yeah, and we've actually got one coming up on Thursday at 10 a.m. And we also monitor that handle the rest of the month as well, and you'll get the three of us along with a bunch of other people monitoring that. But if, like Jacob said, the Ask IE sessions are kind of a focus time where we all literally get in a room and do nothing but Twitter for 2 hours. So Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific is the next chance.
And as far as other ways to provide feedback, the best way is to try out the preview right now, either through remote IE or installing the Windows 10 technical preview, and send feedback. Like Abe mentioned, we have a really close feedback loop there, and we're trying to fix things as fast as possible, informed by data from feedback that we get. User voice for voting on standards, and then finally we have a lot of folks that are pretty active in Stack Overflow. So if you have questions and need help there, we'll try and help you out.
What are the words in Stack Overflow people should search for?
The Internet
Explorer.
Yeah, Internet-Explorer, I think, is the tab.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much. And that's a wrap, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks.
Bye.